because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we are talking about the third of a potential trilogy, or I'm not sure. We're talking about Terence Malick's Song to Song.
I didn't know why I was coming to this party. And then I saw you and I thought, oh, that's why.
We thought we could just roll and tumble, live from song to song, kiss to kiss.
And joining us is returning guest Matt Strohl. Matt is a professor of philosophy at the University of Montana and the author of Why It's Okay to Love Bad Movies, and most recently, the book Hard to Watch. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
Actually, I should say Matt is live in the studio in the field. We have Matt Strohl. That's what I should say.
I am today a third cow in the proverbial field.
He's here with us
I'm actually
in the studio.
in the field.
And we're rolling and we're doing song to song. Now, you know, I should say that Matt and I just got out of a screening of Megalopolis, a sparsely attended screening of Megalopolis. And we will not be talking about it unless you want to say something here, Matt. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I liked it.
Yeah.
It's something I'm going to need to see again.
Yeah.
But I certainly liked it, and it couldn't be more an opposite film, the Song to Song.
All right. Love it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Song to Song. But before we do that, I want to ask you, Matt, about your journey with Terence Malick's films, and in particular, these most recent, 5.
Yeah. So I've definitely been into Malick for a very long time. I'm trying to place the point where it clicked for me, but certainly like since I was in college, I was, so more than half of my life, I've been very, very into Malick. But at the time, he didn't have that many movies, right? There was Badlands, and then Days of Heaven, and then Thin Red Line, and then that was it. And then I remember very well when The New World came out when I was in grad school, and it was like my brother came down from upstate New York, and we drove into the city to see it. And then Malick pulled it from the theater and re-edited it. So we went to like great lengths to get to see it. And then it wasn't even playing.
Oh
so
my
it was like a major event in my life. But The New World, I was just completely blown away by. It was a huge movie for me, movie of the decade. And then, then there was Tree of Life, right? And up till this point, it wasn't a controversial thing to be into Malick. Right. Tree of Life was the first point where like there was even any dissent at all in my world. Like everybody loved The New World. It was just sort of a unanimous movie of the decade pick at the time, at least among the people I knew and professional philosophers and grad students and so on. But then Tree of Life, I think, introduced a schism because a lot of people balked at like, wait, why are there dinosaurs in this? Are these dinosaurs supposed to be showing emotion? Like that's not what their brains were like. They couldn't have, they couldn't, right?
This dinosaur part, not realistic.
So Josh Landy at Stanford and I think we would still argue about this today. Josh Landy at Stanford, he and I were in like a multi-year debate about whether this was bad for the movie or not. Like I love the dinosaurs in Tree of Life, but he did not. So that was the first point that introduced it. But I think still Tree of Life was like a well-received movie. And it was like a movie that people put on their like, best of the decade list and so on.
Yeah.
And people largely gave it the benefit of the doubt. But like in Malick's shift to something closer to a contemporary setting, right? Contemporary setting finally into The Wanderer and the following films. I think some of the things about Tree of Life that people balked at were just amplified into The Wanderer. And then it's like people complained about it more. So in particular, like there's a lot of like sort of sparsely decorated spaces where like attractive people are chasing each other around, holding up bed sheets, twirling, a lot of pirouetting.
Yes.
Outdoors. This goes back. This is in The New World too.
Yeah.
In a similar way, but it was like people complained about that, and then he doubled down. And then like Knight of Cups, it's like 5 times as much twirling in Knight of Cups.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Song to Song, it's like even more twirling. So it was like, of course, even before I had a view about like why is there so much twirling, which I have a view about now, right? But even before I had a view about that, I just like I liked seeing Malick doubling down on being himself. Like I like so it was like the same time that a lot of people were giving up on him. Like the very things that bothered other people were for me. I was like, I really appreciate that Malick is like pursuing this vision all the way to his conclusion. And he doesn't even seem to be aware of how people are reacting to these movies. He doesn't seem to care even a little bit, which I appreciate. And in particular though, as far as like having a journey with these movies, when I first saw them, To the Wonder honestly didn't blow me away. To the Wonder to this day is the one that I sort of have to do the most work to get myself into. Didn't totally blow me away. And there were certain criticisms of it that I thought maybe held water. I've changed my mind about a lot of that now. But like To the Wonder, I was like, well, it's a good movie, but maybe this is Malick's weakest movie. Was my initial feeling about it, which I don't think that anymore. It's just I do find it fairly difficult. And Knight of Cups, I was completely bewitched by it. I thought it was just absolutely intoxicating. Couldn't have told you anything about what it's about. Like I couldn't have said anything intelligent about it until I had seen it at least 7-8 times. And that's part of what appealed to me about it was like, this is a movie that is genuinely mysterious, that like, I feel like I can watch it again and again, and it's still holding back secrets. There's still something to dredge out of this one. So for a long time, it was the one that I understood the least, but also the one I was the most interested in. And then Song to Song, I think Song to Song can be deceptive, right? Because when I first watched, like Song to Song has a much more straightforward narrative than Knight of Cups does. We'll get into that. But Song to Song has like a pretty straightforward narrative. And like there's a pretty obvious, so there's like an Adam and Eve thing going on, right? That's fairly obvious. But then it's somewhat confusing to me. Like I saw some I remember Keith Ulick in particular, like saw the Adam and Eve connection and saw that Michael Fassbender's character of Cook was a Satan figure. I think he labeled Patti Smith's character as the patron saint in the movie. So like I remember reading that, like that makes some sense, but to me, like what stood out more was that it's a Faust story, right? That there's the character of BV, Ryan Gosling's character, and to an extent also Faye, which is Rooney Mara's character, and then also Rhonda, Natalie Portman's character. They all make some kind of deal with the devil in the film. So I was focusing on it more as like a Faust story. And for a while, I thought that the Adam and Eve reading was wrong, but now I realize that both things are right. So we'll talk about that more. But so for me, it was like it actually seemed like a lot more straightforward at first than Knight of Cups, because it does have a much more intelligible narrative. I could sort of see what it was. I could see that there were these archetypes that it was fitting into. But the more time I've spent with it, I realized it's like every bit as complex and difficult as any film that Malick ever made. It's one that, I just watched it a couple days ago and I was still I've seen it so many times, like, 12, 15 times, and I'm still finding stuff that I never noticed before, which is, that says something to the level of complexity that these movies have. So
that's a mark of a good film. So, I mean, Laura, do you want to say anything about your experience with Malick, or should we just jump in?
Well, okay, I'll just admit this, Matt, that like I am one of those people that you expressed in your book like frustration with, in that I like the earlier stuff. When we saw Knight of Cups, you and I decided a couple years ago to get high and like watch a twirly, because we had never seen any of them besides Tree of Life, which I don't know if that even counts, but as like a twirly, or it's not one of those series. But I did not like Knight of Cups, and I dismissed it pretty quickly. Yeah. I was like, I had that reaction that I know you find frustrating, and I understand why you find frustrating. That I think you said like it's arrogant, right? To say like, because I couldn't get anything out of it, therefore there's nothing to get out of it. But I was just like, this movie has no plan, and that kind of annoys me. And it's I was like just on a super I was like, it's very beautiful, but I didn't connect. And I just sort of left it there. And we didn't come back to that for like 2 more years. And then because we were preparing for this, we watched all of them. We watched, what was the order we watched them in? To the Wonder.
Tree of Life.
Then
To the Wonder.
To the Wonder.
And then we just skipped Knight of Cups.
We skipped Knight of Cups.
Right.
And we got a song.
And with each one, I liked them more.
Mhm.
So I wonder now if we go back to Knight of Cups, if I've been softened
Now it's
up.
second favorite.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like what? Because each one I was like, okay, I liked. I'm still totally not quite clicking in with Tree of Life, but like I weirdly liked To the Wonder more, and then I liked Song to Song more, and I wonder now if I'm just like I'm in the zone.
Yeah.
I needed some time, and I needed you to force me to do it.
Well, I do get frustrated because it's like, people, and again, like part of it I think is that like being immersed in this in a social milieu that is full of academics and people have advanced degrees and live. And the thing is that it's like something that Socrates would hammer, which is that when people are wise about one thing, they often take themselves to be wise about other things.
Yeah.
And I found this extremely frustrating that everybody in my sort of social media feed felt perfectly well qualified after one viewing to pronounce summative judgment on these Malick films. And like the thing is, it puts me in a difficult position because their view is these movies are pretentious. And what I want to say in response is, you got to watch that shit 9 or 10 more times before you, right? So it's like if you think those movies are pretentious, then I'm really pretentious, right? So it's something that's been very frustrating for me. And the strategy that I've adopted is I just sit on my hands. Like I don't get involved in conversations about Terence Malick with people that I don't think are like, that like if my sense is that they don't know what they're talking about, because it's the kind of thing that people have immense confidence about despite not having put any effort at all into understanding these movies.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like I just don't talk to these people about it. And like
Yeah.
I just, if I'm gonna say about Malick, I'm like, I don't wanna like, I know you don't like it. I don't want to talk about that. Right. I only want to talk about these movies with people who are into them simply because it's so frustrating to deal with that kind of dismissive attitude from people who really haven't put in the effort that it would have taken to get to get anything out of these movies. Like you literally can't just sit down and watch these once and expect that that's going to work.
Yeah, it's like the same level of frustration that we as professors of philosophy would maybe experience if we had an undergrad read some dense philosophical text and they're just like, well, I didn't get anything out of this. This must suck.
Exactly.
And we're like, we're like, well, no, there's people that devoted their whole lives to understanding 2 sentences out of this text. And
Right.
so,
It's exactly. And so it's a case for humility. Now, of course, I understand, like, if you're like, look, this isn't my thing, I don't care about this, I totally get why you wouldn't. But your attitude ought to be, I don't care about this, I'm not interested in it. Your attitude ought not be, I have decisive knowledge that this is bad. Like this is pretentious goop and I know that.
I mean, I think
Right,
it to some extent it may just be a defense mechanism because the movies are difficult in certain ways. They require a certain degree of effort to get something out of them beyond just the imagery, which is very pretty. And I think a lot of people are lazy in some ways and they're like, do I really want to put in the effort to do this? Not really. And so I'll just say there's nothing here to be found. And then I can exonerate myself from not putting in any effort.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like, I think that is probably for me too, like a defense mechanism. Like I'm like, I felt lost in this movie and I don't like feeling lost, So like, screw you, Malick.
So Justin mentioned, I have this new book. It's called Hard to Watch. And it's about difficulty in film. It's about like why we should watch difficult films, how to go about approaching a difficult film, how to fit them into your life. Like every question, every sort of question you could have about like, well, if I want to get more into difficult movies, what do I do? There's the sort of concept of the book. And like one thing that I think is really important is cultivating this kind of default humility where look, you don't have time for everything. That's totally true. Like a lot of people should not put the work in to study these Malick films closely. They should not do that. But then you also shouldn't think that you know about, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think like cultivating that attitude, it's good. It's not just good for public discourse. It's good for you. It's good. It's for the reasons that Socrates, hammered home. It's good to know what you don't know, right? Especially if you want to have a fruitful relationship with film. It's good to and it's like things like rocks that we haven't uncovered, things that we haven't fully explored yet. Those are like possibilities for the future that we should cherish. Like we're lucky that there are difficult films out there that you can't just that are inexhaustible and will always be there to offer up more value if you keep going back to them.
Yeah, there's something that can be kind of frustrating, or no, I mean not frustrating, but there could be something that's kind of deflating about you go back to a favorite film and you realize there's less there than you thought there was,
Right.
like it's renewing when you get to go back and see new things and that you think the art is somehow has a depth that it can continue to give after repeated
Right.
viewings. So that is really special.
The way that the way that Alexander Namos puts it is like, okay, so like a one night stand is like Jaws, right? And then it's like maybe like a serial monogamy, like a 6-month relationship would be like maybe The Old Man in the Sea, right? But then a marriage would be Moby Dick, right? So it's like some of these works of art are like they're good for one night and that's fine.
Mhm.
But other of these works of art are something that you like will stick with you over the course of your life. Like Three Stories About a Man and a Fish. And but yeah, and it's like for me, those Malick films are a marriage. Like there's something that like I'm always going to be watching these movies, and I'm always going to keep getting more out of them. And a lot of films I love just as much, I watch 3 times total my whole life.
Yeah,
and that's fine. There's place for both.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk a bit about the plot of this film, because Matt, one of the things you mentioned is that the plot is relatively straightforward for a Malick film. Can you give us a kind of brief summary of the plot? Now, by the way, I should just mention to the folks at home that we will sort of simultaneously be talking about the actors and the character names that they have, in part because I can't keep them straight. Also because I don't know if Ryan Gosling's character of BV is ever named.
Yeah.
Anyone ever calls him BV in the actual movie. So I think it's perfectly fine for us to just call them by their actor names. But we might swing back and forth between that. So maybe we'll do our best to note if we'll be a BV. That is Ryan Gosling. Matt, so tell us a little bit about how basically the overview of the plot.
Sure. Yeah. So all of these, this Knight of Cups and To the Wonder are all sort of a little bit harder to follow than they really need to be, in part because of the method which they were made, which is that Malick had kind of a loose plan, but not a script. And he had like some lines of dialogue he wanted in the movie, but he didn't have everything planned. There's a lot of improvisation, and a lot of the narrative was sort of pieced together in the editing room. Right, that was where a lot of the movie was constructed. So so the editing style is often taking you backwards and forwards in time pretty freely. There's a lot of quick cuts and short moments, and you can definitely feel lost. Like where are we? When are we? Who is that? And some characters are introduced and not explained. So the first couple times you watch the movie, it might seem pretty disorienting, but actually it is a pretty simple, straightforward story once you kind of crack the editing code. So the setup is that Ryan Gosling plays a musician songwriter named BV, and he's getting involved he's like up and coming in the Austin, Texas music scene. We see music festival. We see like South by Southwest. We see like actual footage of these music festivals. The movie begins with there's both moshing and twerking, which is new for new for Terence Malick. It begins with like Die Antwoord performance. So this character of Cook, it's Michael Fassbender's character. He's like a record producer. He's a rich guy. He's a power broker in this context. So he can like give you a record deal. He can make your career. He's also a clear stand-in for Satan. That's actually, we know this for a fact, but Fassbender actually said that when Malick explained his character to him, he said, "You're Satan from Milton's Paradise Lost. That's your character." Wow. And there's dialogue. He has dialogue that is either directly pulled from or adapted from Paradise Lost, and also from Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. So that's part of why I was like getting wires crossed. Is this Adam and Eve versus this Faust? Is that there's actually both, like elements of both Satans are represented here. So he's a Satan figure. He's the record producer who can offer you a deal, right? And then Rooney Mara, the character's name is Faye. She has been working for him since she was very young, like as a receptionist, and her goal has always been to like get a record contract through him. But she's in the meantime she's been sleeping with him, and they have kind of a volatile sexual relationship. She says at the beginning of the movie, for a while, sex had to be violent. They have this kind of a little bit of a sadomasochistic sexual relationship. We see some of that. But she meets BV through Cook, and the two of them hit it off. And they sort of start this very pure, very tender. BV is a dreamer. BV wants to like write music to lift people's spirits, he says. Right. So he's like a pure-hearted dreamer. And he starts this very sweet, very chaste relationship with Faye, not realizing that she's like still sleeping with Cook, the Satan figure record producer who he sent to deal with.
And this is something that's not at all clear when you're watching the movie for the first time.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, it's happening so transparently that it looks like, at least, because he's cutting back and forth between BV, there's Gosling and Mara, and then Mara and Fassbender. And you're like, and then they're all hanging out together. So you're thinking, oh, they must all know what the hell's going on. But then you later learn that
he's got no idea.
He had no idea.
He has, she's just representing herself to him as the sweet person. And he's got no idea. Like, again, like they have a very chaste relationship. So like, little does he know where she's actually at is sex has to be violent, right? She says that explicitly at the beginning of the movie. Meanwhile, so those two, their relationship sort of takes off, and they take a trip to Mexico together, and it's like they say later that like that's everything came out of that time in Mexico. Like they're sort of love blossoms on this trip. But the three of them are like, you know, all hanging out together. They're all close. Until eventually Fassbender meets another woman who is like a waitress played by Natalie Portman, the character of Rhonda, and he ends up marrying her. She's religious. Like we actually see him, a Satan figure, go to church with her, and he can't stay. He's like visibly uncomfortable. Like it's too hot in there for him.
Yeah.
And he like has to leave. He like can't stay in the church. So he marries her, and she's clearly like, so she's like, oh, he gave me all this money, and she said I can get out whenever I want. He bought my mother a house. So it's another kind of Faustian bargain. Yeah. So it's like they each want something from him. So both Faye and BV want record contracts, right? And Rhonda wants, you know, financial security. She doesn't want to be a waitress, and so on. So this is the sort of situation. Well, meanwhile, again, Faye continues to sleep with Cook, and Rhonda and Cook get into this sort of increasingly alienated sex games where, again, she's a religious person, and he's introducing her to, like, they're having threesomes, they're bringing prostitutes home, they're doing drugs, right? And she's like increasingly unhappy, and she expresses this. Meanwhile, the relationship with BV and Faye escalates, but it eventually comes to a head where she tells him the truth. Like he asks her, and she just answers the question half honestly.
Yeah.
Right. She's like, yes, I have slept with him. She says only once, but she eventually tells him the whole truth. He becomes very jealous. Meanwhile, also, he's had a separate falling out with Cook because he's discovered that the way Cook wrote his record contract, Cook has exclusive ownership of all his songs.
Right.
So he has like a double falling out where he's like, not only Cook betrayed me, and then you betrayed me with Cook.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have a rift. And at that time, he starts dating another woman, an older woman, Cate Blanchett. Her character is named Amanda. Right. So he has a relationship with Cate Blanchett. And then, while that's going on, Rooney Mara has a relationship with a woman, Zoe, played by Berenice Marlowe. So she has like a lesbian fling. And the two of them get separated. They kind of each do their own thing. And eventually they run into each other again.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I know you, you know, and they like a bunch of other things happen. Like they each visit their own families. That's important.
Yeah.
Rhonda commits suicide, the Natalie Portman character.
Yeah.
So it's like if you think of it as a Faust story, it's a Faust story where Satan gets married, and like it's like it's interesting to me in part because Satan is like striving to be more like BV in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But it's like everything he touches withers and dies. So there's this kind of tragic story for him where he really does seem to care about Rhonda character, but her being with him destroys her. So she dies, and then meanwhile, BV's father is dying, and we've learned that he's alienated from his father. His father was abusive. So he goes back, he sees his family, and he's drawn more now to like just leaving this Austin music scene altogether, going back out to the countryside where he's from. And he ends up like going back to like work on an oil rig, we see, right? And what ends up happening in the movie is that Faye ends up also deciding to leave this music scene behind, and they forgive each other. And it like mirrors the ending of Paradise Lost, where Adam and Eve regain. You say it's a new paradise of forgiveness. So it kind of echoes the ending of Paradise Lost, where Eve is forgiven. And the movie ends with them like sort of starting a new life outside of this music scene.
That's great. That's a perfect encapsulation of the film. And I should also mention that Matt has written an essay on Song to Song and Knight of Cups in which you had this kind of encapsulation, which I found incredibly useful for approaching the film.
Yeah, that essay is called Platonic Myths of Eros in Knight of Cups and Song to Song. It's in the book Life Above the Clouds, edited by Stephen DeLay. I also posted it, preprint version of it on my blog on Strolltopia.
Yeah, check it out. I think one of the weird things about this movie is that it kind of helps to know the plot of the film before you see it. You know, it's like weird. Like, I think there are some movies where if the plot is spoiled for you, that's it. There's almost no point to seeing the movie because the excitement of seeing the movie is getting to the part which would be spoiled for you if you knew the plot. But this is a film which seems to be the opposite. Like, knowing the plot actually helps one approach the film and get into it. And then, because then you're less caught up in
trying to figure out where are we, who is this? Yeah.
And then you can just enjoy the magic of what he has done to knit together these different stories that are kind of coming intertwined and then leaving and going in and out like this. And I think it's reflected in the style of the film. And one of the most distinctive things about this late Malick stuff is that, I mean, you mentioned that he's shooting without a script,
yes.
Or at least the actors don't have a script,
right?
And he has a story outline.
There's no script. He does not write a script.
Okay,
he's got like a story outline, and then like actors are given like, again, I've read just some reports about this, so I'm sure it's done. There's lots of different things he's doing, but like an actor will be given a note card with like some lines of dialogue they're supposed to say, but they're supposed to improvise around that, and just like work this in. And often the camera will film for like quite a while. The camera like rove around. They had a party scene. They might rove around and just film different people as they improvise. And he'll end up, not using the vast majority of what he films, but just getting tons and tons of stuff that he can then use later in the editing room.
Yeah. And in some ways, you might think what Matt just gave us is like the story outline of the film. So you kind of have, then you're armed with that as a map through which to guide yourself when you watch the film. And then, I mean, for the style, I mean, I think there's a lot of, expansive wide angle cinematography. So Lubezki's doing like all this stuff with like hyper, like
almost ultra wide lens, almost the entire film.
Yeah, almost the entire film. I think it's like alternating between wide and extremely wide, right. The two options. Occasionally, it seems like in so wide. I mean, there are fisheye shots in this, and the other thing that I think is another aspect of it that is, I mean, contributes to the weightlessness is it's mostly shot handheld with a kind of, the camera sort of flowing around, and it's almost never just stayed in one position. They're using mostly, I would guess, natural light, because I imagine having a lighting setup in that kind of fluid of a camera environment would basically be impossible. And then the other thing is he's almost prioritizing voiceover over a dialogue in the moment. So you get dialogue in the moment, and this is one where you actually get, I think, more dialogue in the moment than you do especially in like To the Wonder and in Tree of Life. And but you are getting that there are people talking, but then it's mostly done, a lot of stuff, stuff communicated via voiceover. And then another thing, as you mentioned, is the editing. So the scenes in this film, it's like very hard to tell where a scene stops and the next scene begins. It's almost like they kind of just bleed into one another.
Right.
And oftentimes, one other aspect of it that I think is really cool is oftentimes he'll take a sequence where this would be, for example, Ryan Gosling confronting Rooney Mara about her infidelity. And that sequence, which is basically one, you might think of as just one moment or one sort of moment within the plot of the film, is done through, I think, 4 or 5 different settings.
Right.
It's the same conversation taking place, on the street where they're visiting, Ryan Gosling's family. And then, or in an abandoned house,
right,
or in some apartment that she's apartment sitting. It's as if they're having the same conversation. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but it sort of doesn't matter. And then that's all getting knit together in this kind of unique and
I find that so brilliant, because of course that's what breakups are like. You have the same conversation, like going around in circles, make it like, then maybe we should make up, and then you're breaking up again, like for like hours and hours, and you're like having like you're at the coffee shop, now you're at the apartment, now
Yeah.
you're walking, and it's like it sort of conveys the sense that like a breakup is something that happens not in one moment,
Yeah,
but it's
like
like
over
a
time.
process.
Mm.
And then also he's like doing stuff like cutting back to Mexico.
Yeah.
Right. It's like that. So again, like there's this emphasis that their love comes out of this like 30 minutes in Mexico where they like fell in love. And it's like, while they're breaking up, we'll cut back to that without really much of a cue that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Like I had to see the film many times before I was able to grasp like, oh, that scene's happening in Mexico like a year earlier, months earlier.
It's like extreme versions of montage in the sense of like they're just like, because these things are supposed to evoke feelings and things. Like you'll have a moment where Rooney's hanging out with Berenice, her fling at the time, and then she's having what looks to be a memory of her time with Gosling.
Right.
So like there'll be that where she's like longing for him, and they're just, these things are just juxtaposed one after the other. Like she's hanging out, the two of them are hanging out, and then juxtaposed to her hanging out with Gosling, and you're like, wait, is she back with Gosling or what's going on? Like it's in the moment, it's very hard to understand how to interpret these juxtapositions.
Right. The editing principle is like a poetic one rather than like an expository one, essentially.
Yeah. It's evocative rather than plot focused.
How many times?
We had sort of romance, I guess. No, it was more than once, it was several times.
Why'd you just do that?
Do what?
Change your story.
Okay, let's talk about the character of Fassbender and the role that he plays within this sort of little realm of being the kind of seductor. I think it is interesting that I think you're right, Matt, that his character seems to be genuinely upset at the revelation of his wife's suicide.
Yes.
And I think that makes me think of him not the same as necessarily as I would a Satan figure, because I wouldn't have thought of that kind of emotion being one that kind of figure would necessarily have. Of course, the role that he plays is one of the tempter, right? The person who gets people to give of themselves in order to make them beholden to him, etc. But the fact that he is upset about that, I mean, maybe he is as lost as these other characters within this system where he's trying to find his way, and he's maybe just as much of a casualty of this kind of system, of the music scene that they're in, and this kind of fame seeking and that kind of thing. Do you have thoughts on Fassbender in general, Laura?
Yeah, I thought he was great. I think that the breakup that happens between BV and Faye is the most significant, like, sort of relationship and breakup in that movie. But the breakup between Cook and BV is also an important one, and one that I felt. I think like when they spend that time in Mexico, they're all three kind of in love with each other in different ways. And those two guys seem to really I feel like there's more footage in Mexico of BV and Cook.
Yeah.
Playing around than there is of Faye and BV. I think
well, it's
he
also
does end up using BV in a way that he uses everybody, but I think he really does love him. And when he loses him, I think that is a real loss. I think he seems like a really lonely character.
Good. Yeah. And so the Satan figure, thinking him as like the Paradise Lost character, is not like a pure villain, right? It's like and he, he says at one point, "Here I reign," right? When they take, so the thing is that his character is preoccupied with the value of freedom, right? And that's what he's able to offer. And that everybody vocalizes that, especially Rhonda.
Yeah.
She's like, what he represents freedom, i.e., by giving her money, by buying her mother a house, frees her from the set of obligations that she's labored under her whole life. And much Hidden Life, I mentioned, by the way, is also going to be very much about freedom. So I think that's what, like, although this movie is typically lumped together with To the Wonder and Knight of Cups, it also has, I think, a really close relationship with A Hidden Life. But we can talk about that later. But so his character represents freedom. That's what people want from him. That's what he values most, right? But he also repeatedly calls attention to the hollowness and illusory nature of the kind of freedom that he's achieved.
Yeah.
So for instance, when they're like, oh, this is a beautiful place you live in, he says, like, none of this exists. He's like, none of this really exists. He says it's all just free fall.
Yeah.
Right. And then we get this scene where they're literally weightless. Like the original title of the movie was Weightless, right? Song to Song was at one point titled Weightless. And we get the scene where they're literally weightless in his like luxury jet as it like does dives when they're flying back from Mexico. And so we get this kind of and we get this idea that this form of like highly superficial freedom, of like a kind of negative freedom, like there's nothing pinning you down, you have no obligations, you have no family that you have to take care of, you don't have to go to work, right? This kind of superficial negative freedom, that this is the kind of freedom that is embodied by the urban music scene, by like the music festival scene, where the way that Faye puts it is, I thought we could just go from song to song, kiss to kiss, right? This kind of untethered way of being where you drift along from experience to experience without having to care about anything, without having any obligations. And that this is like this idea of freedom that the movie's ultimately critiquing, right? And I take it, though, that it's like he's the Satan figure. So he can't like rid himself of this. Like he's made like a sort of permanent deal to like, or he has to like at least gain admittance back into heaven. But it's like so long as he reigns in hell, he can't he can't shake off this freedom that he's won. And this makes him a tragic figure because even when he tries to tie himself down, even when he tries to gain roots and marry someone, and actually he does love her. I think he does love the Rhonda character. Yeah. She withers and dies precisely because he's like made this, he's the devil. He's made this deal, as it were, where what he gets is unlimited freedom, but then he has to live with unlimited freedom, right?
Well, it is interesting that the notion of freedom that they have is illusory because it ultimately means being beholden to him.
Yes.
Like either in the form of you have to have sex with him in the case of Faye or Rhonda, or in the case of all the music you make will be his at the end. So it's like he's offering this kind of freedom, or but it is illusory.
The Faustian bargain, right? Yeah.
And I mean, the other thing that I think is interesting is that the difference between Rhonda on the one hand and Faye and BV on the other hand is that Rhonda seems to be motivated out of a kind of, I don't know, she wants to help her, like her reasoning for being, with Cook is that she wants to help her mom. Her mom is clearly down on her luck. She's maybe had a restaurant close or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And so he buys her a house. And
Holly Hunter.
It's Holly Hunter, yeah.
Yeah.
And they see, and we see her getting the house built, and then later in the house, it's like this like cookie cutter, like
McMansion.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then, but what I think is interesting is, so that's a kind of freedom, like a freedom from having to work and whatever, work in an ordinary sense. Of course, they're having to work by doing Cook's bidding. But then Faye and BV want something else. So I don't think like there is this sense of they want like just to be untethered, but I think what they're looking for is the ability to do art, like on their terms. So like they're both musicians and they want to make art, they want to make music, they want to be, in the expressive zone. And that to me, was kind of, when you think of like, I just couldn't ignore that seems to be a direct parallel in the case of Malick, somebody who clearly wants to make art, who is, interested in particular expressive art and art that has serious significance for him. And the only way these characters can do it is by making this deal with the devil, where they've given up an aspect of themselves. And I think that's partly why they just think they end up turning away from it, and they turn to each other and they think, okay, it's not worth it. It's not worth that bargain. And we don't see, interestingly, them playing music together at the end. We just see them together. It's as if like in that sense, it's like, I don't know, kind of it's tragic for them because they actually can't do the thing they would want to do because the structure that's in place, the commercial structure that's in place prevents them from doing it. Like they would have to do something like sell out basically to do it. And they're not willing to do that. I mean, selling out, not just in like compromising their artistic integrity, but like selling out in the sense of literally losing a part of their soul, which is a bit more extravagant. But anyway, so that's how I was thinking of it. Like, there's the freedom is coming out. Like, we have to think about what these characters want, and that takes their freedom then is like transmorphed into whatever it is they desire to do with it.
There's a character like that also in Knight of Cups. It's, I think it's Herb. I think it's Michael Wincott. I think that's right. There's a maybe it's somebody. There's like a movie producer character in Knight of Cups that essentially says to the Christian Bale character, like, just churn out the crap I want you to churn out, and like, it's like a Faustian bargain. Like, you can have anything you want, right? And that's more narrowly autobiographical, of course, because Malick really was a Hollywood screenwriter for hire. He wrote a draft of a Dirty Harry movie, things like that. So, Song to Song is the first. So the previous three movies, Tree of Life, To the Wonder, and Knight of Cups, are all pulled quite transparently from episodes from Malick's life.
Yeah,
he really was raised in Texas. His brother died. He really did move like back to the U.S. with a French woman that he married. And he really was like a Hollywood screenwriter in like Christian Bale. Song to Song, he's trying to like get away, I think, from his autobiography and make the themes more impersonal in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still this resonance but I think like that like that's already there in Knight of Cups, right? That kind of cook figure is already there.
Yeah.
And I think as far as what you're bringing up, though, I think it's crucial to recognize that music is functioning. There's both like the surface narrative, but music is functioning allegorically and like not in a positive way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the music scene is it's the movie has a pretty negative outlook on the music scene, right? It's this sort of bacchanalian space where people can sort of like Val Kilmer has this wonderful line where he says the music's all about feeling free. You don't have to do anything to actually be free, right? Which is like a horrible thing that like people that are reveling, it's like you're telling them, it's like, I see right through you, right? But he says that to the crowd in the microphone, right? So I think that's the movie's stance. So I think that like at the beginning of the movie, BV has this idea of what music could be, namely it could lift people up, right? And we do get an example of that in the movie, namely we get Patti Smith singing a William Blake poem, right? Like Mercy has a human face, or that William Blake poem. And that I think is the movie's model of like the kind of music that BV wanted to make that like lifts the spirit. But like, I think that the kind of music that you like make money on, that can be like your career is like, is a negative allegory in the movie.
Yes.
Right. So it's like, they give that up. They're like rescued from it. They like make, and it's like the true music is like, again, is that Patti Smith performance, which,
The music's all about feeling free. So you don't have to do nothing to be free. Why ain't I free? Answer me that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it's that he has Patti Smith and that he has these other sort of famous musicians in there talking about, their experiences or whatever, or having kind of almost philosophical thoughts about music is set against the concert performances, which are very surface level and just designed to like pump up people. But I think what's sort of pessimistic though is that it's like it's almost like sort of wistfully thinking about, what could have been had we actually kept a music scene similar to the one that nurtured Patti Smith alive, because it just doesn't exist anymore. As far as these characters are concerned, they have to go off and work in an oil rig. That's not there's no scene where they find some, music collective of people and that's where they find their expressive outlet. They're just not, their expressions are limited to each other, which is perfectly fine, of course. But it's like, if you're someone who has loftier artistic ambitions, desires to touch the hearts and souls of many, these characters don't reach those heights.
It's one thing to keep in mind, by the way, like you can almost get this idea of Malick as like this finger wagging scold, like don't go to concerts. But it's like one thing that's worth noting is that like that wonderful Texas Monthly profile of Malick, like he's well known to go out like country line dancing, like put on his cowboy boots. It's like, so it's not, I think that's why it's important to highlight the allegorical function. It's not like we can't take the movie's critique of the music scene entirely at face value, because the music scene is like representing something. Namely, it's representing something like Satan's realm in Paradise Lost, right? And of course, and I think that there's a way in which that's not unfair. Like I've been there when I was 2001, 2002, when I was that age, like 21 years old. Like I was going to hippie festivals. I made a quesadilla for Mike Gordon from Fish. I took an unbelievable amount of LSD. Like I did all that stuff. And like this idea that like people who are immersed in that lifestyle are like, like in this illusory world where they are cutting loose of obligations and drifting in a sort of unmoored, superficial way, like totally accurate, right? Like that's actually, yeah, no, you nailed it. Like that's so I think it's not like entirely unfair, but it's also important to keep in mind that it is an allegory and that we need not take it at face value.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I think to that point, I mean, I think a lot of this, you could think of a lot or maybe even all of this film as allegorical. In particular, I mean, just coming back to the style, I mean, I was sort of thinking about how I would describe the style of these late Malick films. And it's like there are two things that seem to pull in opposite directions that are happening simultaneously. One is that you've got a camera that lingers on small little details like a hand or a baby foot, Laura's favorite, or a tree or whatever, or just like a pond and ripples along the water and that kind of thing. And so it's like a detail. It's something detailed, situated, it's concrete, and so on. But on the other hand, everything is like the disjointed presentation and editing, the fact that, for example, in the autobiographical films, they are not set at the time when Malick would have been undergoing these things. I mean, except for maybe Tree of Life, but the other two are set in present day,
right.
Even though these are, supposed to be representations of events that occurred in the 80s or whatever.
Sure.
And so you get this like, okay, I'm supposed to think of this in abstraction of the details. So you've got all these details that place you in a very specific place in time. And you're also supposed to interpret the film as about something that's more transcendent than just this specific place in time. And it's like the two things kind of working together. And so I was thinking of it as like, you might call it situated abstractionism. It's like you're situated in some concrete detail, but then you're expected to abstract away from that to get the broader theme or whatever. And that is just speaking to the point about the music scene, is that like there's all this hyper-focused detail on the music scene and all these different bands, actual musicians.
A lot of dudes
Iggy Pop.
moshing in cargo shorts.
Yeah,
a lot
people
of cargo
moshing.
shorts.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that first low angle one where he's just like, look how many pockets these guys have.
Well, he's like, there's some GoPro footage in there.
GoPro footage.
Yeah.
You don't want a fancy camera in the mosh pit.
No, that's true.
But that maybe, you're supposed to think of this as like just allegorical for, whatever it is that is going to, where you have a certain desire to do something and you're being effectively funneled through this system, which asks you to basically give up your soul in order to get to do, to work within that system or to achieve the
negative freedom that you could. It's like you have to give up, you have to unmoor yourself from everything that matters in order to get to experience this kind of freedom. In order to get to live from song to song, you have to give up everything else.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. To be an expressive artist or whatever. Yeah. You have to. You have to sell your soul to Michael Fassbender. And, but that said, I mean, if there was anyone who I wanted to have my soul, would it be Michael Fassbender in this film? Maybe.
Do you think that when Michael Fassbender got not the script, but the outline, he was like, cool.
No script,
the outline. He was like, so I'm Satan. I'm going to wear my sunglasses just right in the middle of my forehead. I'm not going to put them on the top of my head like everybody else. No. That's my character. That's my main character move.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think that's probably one of the first things he took from
just
Malick.
saying.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a real
menacing.
choice.
Yeah, for sure.
How many sets of eyes does he have? He's got to shade the ones on the forehead too.
Oh,
he's always like crawling around on the ground.
Yeah,
and
he's like
shit.
acting like
He's
an ape.
very snake-like.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The way he moves in this is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I had something to say and then I totally
No, it's
forgot.
fine. These
No,
things
but
happen.
in terms of like the aesthetic style, I don't think that anybody better captures the way memories feel in my head.
Right.
Like distant memories, childhood memories, memories that are layered with nostalgia and have a lot of distance. and emotions that I'm putting on top, layering on top of them, while also feeling like very immediate and very specific. Like one of the memories that I have from my first house that I ever lived in is a magnet, a waffle magnet that looked like it had butter melted on it. And like it's so vivid in my head now. And that just Malick seems to get that. Like that when we think about our childhoods, we think about it abstractly and as a whole and like with a lot of hindsight and with our grown-up minds, but also like that, the magnet is the thing that flashes the brightest,
Yeah.
I don't know how I managed to get at that
on
so
that
well.
point, Matt, in one of the things I read of yours about Terence Malick, you noted that these films are by many critics were compared to perfume commercials.
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm just to connect it back to you though, Laura. I mean, what this thing that often is the strongest cure of memory is a smell.
Right.
And you might think that perfume commercials are trying to evoke that with, the kind of the way they are shot in this kind of Terence Malick way, and so you might think similarly, there's a reason for that. Like this kind of lilting approach people might describe as poetic is an attempt to visually represent the experience that you get when a certain smell hits you and immediately forms a sense memory in your head.
Yeah. And especially Tree of Life. I think like Tree of Life, like your early childhood memories of your mother. It's like so like the way your mother glows and it's just beautiful. Like I agree with you though. That, like I can't think of any film that captures the sensation of memory more vividly. And it's like something, and this is part of why though you need to see these movies more than once. Is that like you said that they're operating in so many different levels, and it's like you kind of need to see them once just to get the lay of the land, and then you can in other viewings. I try to have like prompts, like what am I going to focus on, right? And so it's like you kind of need like a fresh viewing for each prompt that you want to consider because there's too many things that the movie is doing to be able to take them all in at once.
Yeah. I think it's also, I mean, these are kind of movies that it's really can be worthwhile if somebody is seriously interested in the movie to just try to divide the film up into the segments where you could divide a scene and then look at that sequence. I was trying to do this earlier today just to remind myself what happened. Look at the sequence. If you're watching it on Amazon Prime, for instance, this film is on Amazon Prime, you could just scrub through it so you can kind of, get the lay of the land, as you were saying earlier. You can kind of scrub through, get that space, and then play through it and then take notes about what's happening. Yeah. Like there's a shot here, they're talking about this. And then suddenly that's juxtaposed immediately with no dissolve or anything with a shot of them somewhere else in space and time.
Yeah.
Completely different setting. They're talking about the same thing or they're not. What's going on? And why is he doing it in this way? Because the whole film, it defies a lot of standard film grammar and film conventions in this regard, in that it has that kind of thing. And when you're watching it, like for the first time, it's overwhelming. And also, I think we're watching it for the first time, you're thinking in terms of normal film grammar, where you're thinking, okay, so this is supposed to be happening simultaneously, or this is a memory, or how I have to find some way of interpreting this in the standard form. And it just isn't. It's not the standard form. It's breaking with the usual conventions. And it's doing that with a certain evocative purpose or a certain allegorical purpose or whatever. But so I think like watching it just even in like segments can be quite useful and illuminating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could give an example of this. Because I wrote a bunch of these down. I was just like, this is wild. So like, the beginning when we're introduced to Rooney Mara's character, and this is where like she's got some, she's got some various voiceover. She's playing music, and this is her, on stage playing music. One of the early scenes. Next shot, it's her with a young girl.
I know. Who I immediately, it was like, is that her daughter?
Exactly.
Who is that?
You're thinking, oh, fast forward, is this her daughter? Like,
or is she a working mom? Like I was like, okay, she's a musician.
Normally,
mom.
That's how you would interpret it if you were watching this.
No, maybe that was her niece. Who knows?
It's her niece. It's her niece.
Okay.
This is like we've now fast forwarded to a scene basically that we're going to get at the 2-hour mark of this film, which is like being juxtaposed with
I don't think that's so.
We do, because she goes and visits her sisters.
I know, but what's her hairstyle in that scene when she's with her sister?
Good point. But either way,
because she also has the the band for her tour, like her
when she's with the girl.
When she's with the girl, she's still wearing one of her concert bands.
Maybe not.
So I think that,
I might be wrong about that.
She's got the baby bangs. We're still temporally in the beginning of the film.
you're not going to know who this person is
No.
until
For
the 2-hour
forever.
mark.
Like,
That's
yeah.
the thing.
I completely
So-
forgot about that little girl. I
Yeah.
was like, eventually I was like, okay, I guess she doesn't have a daughter. Moving on. I
Yeah.
don't know who that girl was.
Okay, but then you can ask
Yeah.
the question, why juxtapose these two things? Now, the
Mhm.
answer might just be because the girl came to visit her while she was on stage, and this is what she did after she got off stage. Maybe. But another way you might think of it is that it's contrasting the two central drives in her life, music and this kind of pull to the domestic, the serenity, the thing that she admires about her sisters. And we get this with when she has a conversation with her father, she feels like she failed him.
Right.
She does feel a pull to settle down and like have kids of her own. And she feels like a failure not having done that. So you could think, oh, maybe this is just actually just showing us the two desires that centrally animate this character. But like, there's no way you could possibly get that on the first viewing.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing I didn't even really get until I scrubbed through the film,
Right.
like basically frame by frame.
No, yeah, watching it this time when I sat down with Angela to watch it, and I'm like, this feels so good to just watch it because that's the way I've been watching this movie for a long time now. Is like I've seen it enough times where I'm just going through and like watching a scene and then going back to another scene and scrubbing around, just trying to make connections and work out questions I still have about it. And it's been a while since I watched it without a notebook in my hand, just sat down and watched the movie. And I'm like, yeah, this movie's still great. was how I felt. Another thing like you're talking about that I'd point out, there's a detail for me that just blows my mind. So one motif that's very prominent, both in Knight of Cups and in Song to Song, and to a lesser extent, even into The Wonder, is birds in flight, right?
Yeah.
In Song to Song, it's like it's like every scene has something. That's like or nearly it's once you're looking for it, it's absolutely ubiquitous in the movie. And so that half hour in Mexico that I keep bringing up, they mentioned that they like saw the birds together like that period of time. And I take it that this might be a controversial claim, but I take it that this is actually picking up directly from this motif in Knight of Cups. And he did make these movies back to back, like seamlessly. He filmed them both and then edited them one after the other after he finished all the filming. So I think it's not implausible to think that he was sort of picking up a motif that he from the previous movie. And in particular, there's a scene at the beginning of Knight of Cups where we hear Charles Laughton narrating from Plato's Phaedrus, which is about the soul's wings, right? In particular, that the soul once had wings when in heaven before the fall, and that when that romantic love like reminds us that the soul once had wings and makes the soul want to take up flight, and this is flight to something higher, right? And we in Song to Song, there's this moment where Faye says there's something out there that wants us to find it, and that's like the divine light, right? So I take it that it's like this sort of Platonic model, but like adapted to a Christian theology, which of course, I mean, that's the history of Christianity.
Yeah.
The Neoplatonism and early Christianity were bound up together. So
Best buds.
Right. So I take it that all these references to wings and flight are they're doing they're doing a lot of work, right? There's like this sort of freedom and wandering, that's part of it, but also this idea that like romantic love is like a step on this sort of spiritual journey. It like makes us want to seek something higher. It's like it's something, and I think that's what Knight of Cups is about. I think people misread it. I think people think Knight of Cups is about like all these beautiful women tempt him into like a secular, debased life, but it's exactly the opposite of that. It's about how these beautiful women like reawaken his soul and make him strive towards this higher divine light. But there's all these bird images throughout the movie, right? And like, and that's the scene you're talking about where we cut between different stages of the breakup, right? There's this really, really difficult moment where they like have sort of aggressive sex, like while they're still fighting, and it's like
it's like on the table,
like on the table where like it's like they're in the process of breaking up, but they have sex in the moment, they're like crying. It's like very difficult. And there's a hanging down, there's like a bird ornament that they're like bouncing into during that scene. Right, there's like this fake birds, and then do you remember what it cuts to? We cut to BV out in a field with a shotgun, bird hunting. Right. Like that's like interspersed, and it's like this totally decontextualized. It's like we never like see like, oh, BV's a bird hunter. It's a big thing that he's into. It's just this out of nowhere scene. It doesn't even look like he's really hunting. He's just walking around with a shotgun. But there's this out of context scene where he's bird hunting that has like purely metaphorical significance. I think, right?
Yes.
And it's just like this. It's like I had to watch the movie a bunch of times before that even registered. Like, wait a minute, he's freaking bird hunting.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't actually see them officially like break up, right? So
she says we broke up.
She says we broke up, but you don't see it.
You see just like some time slices of the breakup.
Just time slices of them sort of falling apart. But then you see them have sex, and you're like, maybe they're getting back together.
Yeah, but you know, that's just sort of one stage of the breakup.
Exactly.
Like
But you might then just think of the bird hunting as like, that's him just like,
that's the moment.
That's like he's calling it. That's your visual signal that this has ended.
Right.
He's killed the birds that were in flight while they were having sex.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, you pointed that out in your essay, and there's absolutely no way I would have caught this.
But even the like plastic birds, it's like a sort of mocking imitation of the real thing, which again, like to me, signals this Platonic motif of like the imitation and reality, where like we can confuse the imitation, the fake version, for the real thing. We can confuse Cook's freedom for actual freedom, and like actual freedom for Malick is what we find in A Hidden Life, right? Which is like obedience to the divine law. Like he thinks like, so it's like in A Hidden Life, when the character, forget the character's name, he chooses to die rather than to pledge allegiance to the Nazis. And they keep telling him like, nobody will know about it. You can just like say like, I like Hail Hitler one time and we'll let you go. You can go back to your wife. And he's like, the way he frames it is in terms of freedom. He's like, once you give up trying to live at all costs, right? Then this marvelous light of freedom opens up in your soul, right? So for Malick, like true freedom is bound up with this kind of like absolute commitment, which is like the polar opposite of Cook's freedom.
Yeah. It goes back to the promise of freedom that you get from Cook is one that has attachments to it, that you're tethered. And there's actually a visual metaphor for that in the film too, which is I was thinking about weightlessness. I was thinking about flying, things that might go in for freedom. There's a moment when BV and Faye are in one of Faye's like empty apartments that she apartment sits or shows or whatever. And he takes some toilet paper roll and he throws it out the window, and the camera like lurches over, but he holds on to it. So the toilet paper roll like flies down, but it's still held onto by him. So he's still got an attachment to it, even though you're in free fall, you're flowing. Hi, I'm totally free. You're still being held back by someone. In this case, it's BV, but in the general case, it's Cook. It's the person who holds the strings. And then the genuine freedom is choosing that attachment, like, you know, yourself to that you can't live without attachment, but you can choose in a kind of, I don't know, in like whatever sui generis way that matters, your attachments, the things you commit to.
Right. It's highly significant, I think, that like in that final stage of the movie where they awaken to the new paradise of mercy and freedom, that they all go visit their family.
Yeah.
Right? That's like, it's like, it's and like, so, and earlier in the movie, BV says to his brother, he's asked him like, Dad, you still pray for him? And he says like, not anymore.
No,
right. And so there's this beautiful scene where he goes to see his father who's like had a stroke, and he's got crumbs on his shirt, and he wipes the crumbs off his father's stomach. He says, and he breaks down crying. And again, that's like the Blake poem comes home. Like mercy is God's human face, as it were, right? It's like, in other words, mercy is like a divine thing that human beings can do. That's the way to walk in the image of God, is to show mercy. So it's like we already know that his father has been a horrible man, and that he's sort of estranged from him and has given up on him. But like in this final, we get this act of mercy and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And it's the same mercy and forgiveness he extends Faye, and that she extends herself.
Yeah, and the mercy, which is a kind of acceptance, or it's like a forgiveness in a way, has to also be directed towards yourself. And that's what they do at the end in order for them to then take the next step. So I think, what is it that Gosling says at the end? I got to go back and start over like a kid. You've got to like forgive yourself to go back to the state of innocence as a kid. And I didn't have the right heart in me, but you can do that if you have mercy for yourself and for those around you. So you can go back and start again. And that is a very powerful and uplifting idea.
It is. And it's also like, so something we should address. It's like people often point out that there's something very conservative about this in the movie. It's, in other words, like we like the movie essentially, like we travel from like the purgatory of the urban music scene to like the paradise of like rural America, right? Which is like the sort of conservative outlook. So it's where, I mean, we kind of have to address that.
Yeah.
Right? And it's at some level it's there. Like you can't deny that that's there in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, but it's, I would emphasize again that it's like heavily allegorical, right? And that like you have to think of it in terms of what the rural simple life represents, not just sort of literally the rural simple life, right? You have to think of that as like a place where you can put down roots, where you can form obligations, where like the number of people, like, so the difference between a small town and the big city is, the big city, there's so many people you encounter all the time that you can't extend very much concern to any of them. Whereas the small town setting, you're very concerned about everyone, right? So it's like sort of allegorically represents that kind of rootedness, groundedness, obligation, which Malick is suggesting, I think, is the beginning of true freedom.
Yeah. I think we can't fully make, I'm not convinced we can be fully allegorical about about this, because the music scene, as you said, the music scene that he depicts is a real one. It is like it's not as if like,
and he's not wrong about it.
Yeah,
either.
exactly.
It's not wrong. Yeah.
It's not like this is a scene that is not obsessed with ephemera. Like the whole idea of that kind of live music is embracing the ephemera of a collective crowd experience. And, I'm not as down on that in general, but I think what's interesting is that it's the thing that's behind that, which is, the gatekeeping aspect of it that's there. And of course, it's not just there in the music scene. It's there in Natalie Portman's character as well, who isn't trying to be involved in the music scene at all. She's just trying to lift herself and her mom out of poverty. And I think the most powerful scene that for her is the sequence where she's basically stopped, like they finished having a threesome with some sex worker.
Right.
And then she's talking to the sex worker, and the sex worker is explaining like, I see this as a kind of expression or whatever. And I'm not like, I'm doing this just for now and this and that. And I think her husband or her boyfriend had died or something. So she's been put in this horrible situation. And you're just thinking the whole time, Rhonda must be thinking, oh yeah, I'm the same.
There is the dialogue. She says that. So
yeah. Oh, right. Okay. I can't remember.
So the prostitute says, I don't sell my soul. I sell an illusion. Right. That's what I buy. I sell an illusion.
Yeah.
And then we get voiceover narration in Natalie Portman's voice, and she says, "Is that me?
Is that me?" Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. Okay. She's clear, and then it's right after this that she commits suicide. Basically,
exactly.
She goes to church.
That's what precipitates her suicide.
Exactly.
And then everyone's confused. Like, did she ever express suicidal ideation? Like, nobody sees it coming.
Right.
But it's like, you're right. It's that recognition that clearly precipitates her suicide.
Yeah. She's like realized
that she's lost herself.
Yeah. She's become, even though she's entered into a godly relation, because she's a religious person, so it matters that this be a godly relationship.
He went to church with her.
Exactly.
He really did try.
He's trying.
It's really important, I think, to recognize that he does care about her.
Yeah.
And that he, like, Satan went to church.
Yeah.
Right? Because he cares about her that much.
Yeah. But she is in a weirdly ungodly relationship because she's effectively a prostitute, and that sucks.
Right.
Like that's so hardcore to think like, I can't be in a genuine relationship with this guy because of this power differential, effectively.
Yeah.
I think that sex worker even wants to be a teacher.
Like her.
It's a very sad scene.
That was the other thing I was going to say. I think Rhonda gives up. Like, we could think about what she gives up. Maybe she gives up, like, she said, she's giving up some dimension of her moral view in this. But I presumably she wants to be with kids. She's a kindergarten teacher. She wants to have kids. Clearly, Cook is not going to have kids with her. So she's given up her like hope of having a family, and being rooted in all that as well. So she's made that sacrifice as well. Again, for her mom, seems, which is good, but also not good.
She also does care about Cook, right? Like that. There's a sense in which like she really doesn't want to leave the marriage. She just like right.
Yeah,
it's like she does. She's in a way like a willing participant in all this, but it's just that then she sees who she's become and can't live with it.
I want to ask you about, just since we're on Rhonda, so she has this trip experience where she takes mushrooms.
Because this is dipped in God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get this black and white sequence. So what the hell's going on
It's a French
there?
movie.
Okay.
It's I think it's called Monomonant. Let me pronounce this correctly.
Okay. It's like images of Saturn, stars, then this which is all part of this movie, I guess, where this guy ends up killing someone with an axe.
With an axe. It's a 30-minute movie. You got to watch it. Hang
Okay.
on. Let me... Menilmontant here.
Okay.
You took French in high school.
Menilmontant. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a 30-minute French silent movie, 38 minutes long. It's pretty easy to see. It's great. You should absolutely see it. 1926 film written and directed by Dmitry Kirsanov. And it does include an axe murder, crucially.
So wait, what's the significance of this for the purpose of this film? Like, why have scenes from this movie in your film during this trip sequence?
At one point I thought about this, and I like forget now what conclusion I came to.
No worries. I was curious because I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
We
were like, Matt's got this whole thing cracked.
Right. No, this is something that I never really totally understood. Let's see, a couple's trying to remember this. Both in love with a Parisian thug.
You're just gonna have to watch it for the 18th, 19th, and 20th time, and then come back to us.
So here's a synopsis
All right,
that might
give
be
us a
helpful.
synopsis of
In the
Menilmontant.
aftermath of a shocking, brutal axe murder, two young sisters moved to Paris in the impoverished working-class district of Menilmontant to eke out an existence in the heart of a faceless, bustling people metropolis. The girls make artificial flowers. However, a chance encounter with a handsome but ill-intentioned man will pave the way for seduction, jealousy, estrangement, and even prostitution.
Wow, so it's the plot of Song to Song.
Yeah. So it's like the Menilmontant is in a way is evocative of Rhonda's arc.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here that if you translate Menilmontant, it's song and then the number 2 song. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what that is, though. So the black and white footage that we see at that point is from this 1926 silent French movie, Menilmontant, which is a brutal, is a sort of brutal, shocking axe murder. Which then these two girls go to the big city and they have an experience that I think you could take to be comparable with Rhonda.
Mm-hmm. That was the other thing about starting over. There's that sequence where the I don't know who it is. One of the women is like got some some picture on her wall and it's a snake skin, and she talks about the renewing rebirth.
That was Zoe, the girlfriend.
With Zoe, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting that BV wants this rootedness, wants this mature relationship, and he ends up with this woman who's much older than him who already has a kid.
Yeah. Right.
And so you could think that he's trying to sort of skip directly to the commitment without sort of the work of building it up. Right. Whereas I don't know. I definitely don't know quite what to think about this relationship that Faye has with the woman Zoe. I think one way to think of it is that it's like a middle ground between BV and Cook, right? Where it's not she's not as intense as BV and okay, I want your eternal love. We gotta move out to West Texas and start a family. But it's also a tender, gentle, nurturing relationship, unlike Cook. Right. So I guess I've thought of that interlude as a kind of way station for her where she's able to gain clarity about what she wants, that with the sort of BV is too much for her. She can't, it's she can't compute it. So she just sort of goes back to Cook. And this is this middle ground type of relationship. That's the best I can do, though. I think that's one of the hardest parts of the movie to understand why it's there, what it's doing.
Yeah. And we don't see them break up, do we? Faye and
it's not a big bad thing. Yeah, it's a casual. It's sort of casual.
Yeah.
She's house sitting, right? The French woman that she's with.
She's house sitting.
She's house sitting from France, so she's only there temporarily.
Oh, I see.
So it's a relationship that is, I think, inherently limited.
Yeah.
Where it's she doesn't have to get bound and committed, but it's also again a much more nurturing. Relationship than what she has with Cook.
It's what we would call a rebound.
Yeah.
She needed that
For
rebound.
sure.
She needed to get rebounded off these guys. That brings me to my favorite scene of the movie, which is, a very straightforward scene in a lot of ways, but it's also striking in that it's not edited the way the other scenes are. And I'm talking now about the scene where Gosling is having lunch with his mom and Cate Blanchett.
Yeah.
And that is a very intense scene where they're not even nobody's really talking, but Gosling gets up, Blanchett is next to the mom, and they don't say a single word to each other for, God knows how long. He comes back and, it's so awkward, so incredibly awkward. But I really love it because it is, we see all this abstracted stuff in these Malick films. And then this is a very grounded, this is the kind of scene you would see in any ordinary, Oscar movie. But I like it. I like it in this context.
It's really weird. It's kind of out of place in the sense that it's like hard to fit it into the broader allegory, as it were.
Yeah.
Right. But it is like quite a striking scene. And the mother's performance there
so good.
Is so good. Yeah.
She's just looking at Gosling the whole time. She won't even like deign to recognize the Blanchett. I mean, and it's also wild that they're maybe the same age. I mean, they look like they could even be the same age.
Blanchett and the mom.
Yeah, and that Gosling had previously had this interesting conversation with his mom where he called her like a
Stone Cold Fox.
Stone Cold Fox. Like he has this, he has a very an intimate relationship with his mom.
Yeah.
She's maybe a little jealous of Cate Blanchett.
I don't know. She's just ageist, I guess. I don't know. What is she? Because then Blanchett gets up and he goes, "What did you do?" And she's just like, "It's not right." I think she says something like that. It's not right.
Yeah.
Maybe not right for you, but also I think she's just, she's weirded out.
It is also interesting that they then don't, I thought maybe they just break up immediately. Like he walks to catch up with Blanchett and he says, "Hey, can I walk with you?" And she just turns and walks the other way, which is an incredibly striking thing to have. And in a movie full of allegories, you might think, great. That just shows how strong they broke up. But then they are still together for a few more scenes. And I think it's interesting. We get this sequence where Blanchett is, she's got her necklace and it breaks and she gets her pearls all over the ground and all over and I don't know what to make of that, but I find it was like, we spend a little bit of time.
We spent a little bit of time gathering up those pearls. I remember my wife. I watched it with Angela a couple days ago, and she gasped, like, "Oh, the pearls!" Like it's quite something.
Yeah, I don't know what it means, but it's very deliberate that that's happened. But maybe it has something to do with their breakup. I mean, I don't know.
She's falling apart.
Yeah.
I've had that happen before. It's
the pearls.
Yeah, it's a stringed necklace that has broken apart and they just bounce all over the place, ricocheting everywhere. It's very unsettling.
Right. And sorry, I just remembered that the last thing of that is she's on the boat on a river. Both of them are shown, but separately on boats on rivers. That is Gosling and Blanchett. Maybe they're even shown going opposite directions. Hard to tell. The way it's cut, I think they're actually weirdly going in the same direction. But yeah, but it's interesting. Again, it's like we know they break up, but it happens in this weird kind of magically diffuse way where you have to like interpret these images, which aren't just like an image of people breaking up. It's something else. It's like an image of people walking in different directions and stuff. I just have to say one last thing about the final bit. I mean, they go to wherever he is in West Texas. Did you say, Matt? Where he goes to work?
Well,
on
he says they go out west.
They go out
which
west.
It sure could looks like. I mean, it's not like West Texas in like Big Bend, but it's like, west of Austin.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he's working on the oil rig, and I think these are some of the most striking images of the film because you get these nighttime shots, still shots. Actually, this is the first time the camera seems to be still of oil rigs and of like the sun rising over the horizon and these just like dusk shots. And they're just incredibly beautiful. It's like super pretty Lubezki stuff, where he knows exactly the right time to turn the camera
Adam and Eve's
on.
New Paradise, right? And you have to really convey that with the beauty of the imagery. And it's like Malick and Lubezki are absolutely up to this.
Yeah. And then you get the final shot at the embrace on I guess it's on like some sort of rocks that have little tide pools in them or something. I don't know. There's like these little pools where you couldn't get ripples. And they're shown in embrace, and it's beautiful. It is like a really beautiful and like uplifting final shot.
like this.
So Matt, tell us about the book, Hard to Watch, and when does it come out, and how what's the central sort of premise or pitch for the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book comes out this month. I think it's like October 15th, something like that. I mean, I think if you ordered it from Amazon, you'd probably get it before that.
Okay.
So it's coming out like now.
Yeah.
And this is definitely my sequel or follow up to my first book, Why It's Okay to Love Bad Movies. You certainly don't have to read them in any order. You don't have to read them both, but in my mind, they're like a dual. They're like a yin yang kind of pair. So for me, these books represent the two sides of cinephilia. There's, on the one hand, there's the devious side. There's the I'm gonna watch like all these like awful cult movies and nobody can stop me, like late at night on Tubi. But there's cinephilia is also about aspiration. It's also about, and in my mind, like the further you go into cinephilia, typically the further you trend ultra high and ultra low, and the less you care about the middle. It's like you stop caring about like these sort of Oscar movies at all, or whatever. You stop caring about that stuff like at all, and you're like, no. Like I'm into like Terence Malick and like Tommy Wiseau or whatever, right? This is sort of absolute polar extremes. So the Hard to Watch book is about the highbrow side, as it were, the aspirational side, the side that's about taking on movies that genuinely challenge you and that demand something of you, and that like you can't really productively engage with them unless you make them a part of your life in like a really substantial way. Just like the first book was about like, what loving bad movies, it goes beyond just watching the movies and thinks about like, what does that mean in your life? Like, what is that? So this new book, I tried to do something analogous, right? So the book, roughly what the book starts with is the sort of practical difficulty of just like, it's hard to watch difficult movies. Like people are busy, we're stressed out. Like, it's just hard. It's like so much easier to sit down and put on like a football game or like play a video game or put on a movie you've seen before that's easy, or like Adam Sandler, or like watch another episode of the new HBO serial or whatever it is. So the beginning of the book is kind of about my own struggles, where I had a period in my life where I really drifted away from challenging myself with movies, which for people who know me now, that might be hard to imagine because I get after it now, right? I watch a lot of movies. I know, but there was a period in my life when I kind of stopped caring and like drifted away from it. So I tell the story about like how I got back into it and like what are the lessons I learned about this, right? And so the way the book is framed is like, it's not for somebody who needs convincing. Like it's for somebody who wants to get more into movies, who does care about this, and who maybe needs some motivation, or who like needs like a nudge, who needs like to something. Like I needed to have my cinephilia reinvigorated at some point, and I want to like, okay, like here's what I learned through that process. Yeah, right. Yeah. Essentially,
it's kind of self-help, but like
in
from
a way,
your own experience.
Yeah, it's based on my own experience, and again, it's like I'm not telling you like, hey, everybody ought to be in difficult movies. I'm saying if you want to, follow me. I got some stuff that I could do. I can share some wisdom with you here because I've been through this.
Yeah, to the point of offering very practical advice for people who like all of us have experienced of like, I probably want and need to see this movie, whatever it is. I don't know. It's what was one you Showa or something.
Right. Exactly.
And then you're like, but when are you in the mood to sit down and watch Showa? And how do you overcome that kind of like, well, I'm tired now. It's 9 p.m. I'm not going to be able to get through this whole thing or whatever. And like, so I'll just put on, like in our case, one of the most recent things that this happened to us was we were maybe going to watch something more interesting. And then I was tired and I was like, let's just put on Tarot.
Yeah.
We watched Tarot. And that movie sucks.
Mm-hmm. It did.
That movie really sucks.
Yeah. I've been stressed lately, partly ironically because of the book. So I've been watching a lot of like old poker reruns and stuff like that. So it's something that you can't avoid in life, right? Yeah. It's okay. Like you don't have to watch difficult movies all the time. Yeah. But the point is, if you don't like make an active effort, you're always gonna have an excuse.
Right.
You're never gonna get to it.
It's too easy, especially in the age of streaming, to just let the algorithm pick your movie for you. Yeah, and it's gonna pick some Ryan Reynolds.
That's another thing the book's about, is the way the technological environment encourages this kind of this kind of lifestyle where we don't challenge ourselves at all. Yeah. But so then from there, the book moves into questions about like, well, I suggest that part of what we need to do is find people that know more than us and follow their lead, right? but like a lot of people question that, and like when it comes to movies, pretty much everybody feels qualified. Like they don't, and that's part of I think why like film critics are such a disrespected profession this day and age, is that people feel like they don't need. It's like, so I remember vividly, like Elon Musk had this graphic where it showed like the gap between the audience scores and the critics scores, and it's like, wow, critics are really out of touch, right? I mean, that's not the right sort of inference to draw from that. But the point is that this is how people think of it.
Yeah.
People think of it like the jobs of critics are to be like weather vanes that are going to like accurately forecast what people are going to like, and it's like it's just a mess. And the fact is that if you want to get deeper into film, you need film criticism. You need it. It's inherent. Like I think there's no such thing as like cinephilia without criticism. You just can never, like, because you can't entirely on your own efforts. Like you need to like build from the work other people have done. Otherwise, you're just not going to get very far.
Yeah.
So like the second chapter of the book is really a defense of the whole idea of critical expertise. And like then I try to actually perform a demonstration where I try to like make the mechanics apparent. So I actually have a long critical discussion of a particularly difficult movie, Alain René's Muriel or The Time of Return. And the goal of it is to get you to see like how helpful this can be to somebody to kind of walk you through their thinking about a movie. And there's a lot more going on than that, but that's the basic idea. And then from there, I get into sort of different kinds of difficult movies, like in particular, movies that are allegedly very slow and boring. And I really take Jean Dielman as like the initial starting case, because it's when I was writing the book, Jean Dielman won the Sight and Sound poll. So it was like, I can't not talk about this in this book now. I had to actually change my plan when that happened.
Oh, what boring movie were you going to talk about instead?
I don't even remember, but like I was still deciding, but like I had started writing the chapter and I like ditched what I have and started over. Because like this now, so there's a long critical discussion of Jean Dielman. I don't want to give it away, but I have a lot, like a whole take on that. And then like a long discussion of the idea of like boredom and like movies are like that it's a bad thing for a movie to be boring. And there's a lot I have to say about that. And then the next chapter is about like emotional difficulty, like discomfort, various kinds of discomfort, being disturbed. And I try to address like there's this idea that's been, you know, it's you have to be careful here because it's really easy to come up with a straw man. But like there's this idea that's very much in the air that like, you know, oh, we suffer enough already. We should have art to make us feel good.
Right.
And like, particularly when it comes to marginalized groups of people, like we don't need to see Black people suffering anymore in movies. Like we've seen that enough. Right. Yeah. And so there's this idea that like, we need positive representation. We need, and I try to like, as sensitively as I can, I try to navigate some of these waters and make a case that like, look, like that ideal, the ideal that like, we want movies to make us feel good. To reinforce good feelings, and that we don't want to see negative representations. We don't want to see negative imagery. I try to show that that's misguided, and that indeed, especially in a way when it comes to marginalized people, that there are often cases where the earnest depiction of misery and suffering is really important, right? So I try to make a case for that, and I also I grind an axe over the movie Titan, which is a movie that I've been a very strong advocate for since it came out, but that I feel like even though it won a lot of awards and even though it was well reviewed, it's also been greatly disrespected, I think. Like there's definitely a certain kind of cinephile that just lumps Titan in with like, I don't know, The Substance, this new one, and like, you know, a bunch of like fake Cronenberg French bullshit that is just very strong. But then even among people that like Titan, I don't feel like they're very fair to it. I feel like they emphasize like how cool it is or how shocking it is or whatever. And like the thing is that Titan has so much going on beyond the body horror and the shock tactics. So I try to like use this occasion to grind an axe, and I finally deliver my like long form piece on Titan in this context. And then the book finally goes back to practical stuff. And the last chapter is really about internet cinephilia, because the thing is, I think that like to progress in cinephilia and to learn a lot about movies, like the best way to do that, short of going to school, is to immerse yourself in internet cinephile culture. But this is also rife with hazards. A lot of these people is like, you know, people listening to this, if you're listening to this, you're probably in that culture, right? And that, as you know very well, a lot of these people are assholes, right? So it's like, and a lot of these people, like the way they let their internet activities and their cinephilia overlap is damaging their cinephilia. They're more concerned with like getting interaction online than they are with having an honest, earnest, you know, they're being in a shared project together of trying to understand these movies. Yeah. They're not trying to do that. They're like feeding their own ego by like having their opinions taken seriously or something like that, right? So, I try to like I've struggled with this myself. Like I used to be a cinephile hermit. I used to not talk to anybody about movies except maybe my brother. I used to watch thousands of movies, but just keep them to myself. And I've recently, in the last really like 4 years, 5 years, have gotten more involved with a broader community of cinephiles, which means getting involved in online cinephilia.
Yeah.
And like a lot of this is, again, like my own struggles to try to make this a positive, productive part of my life and not let the negative parts of it, not let that take anything away from me.
That sounds awesome, Matt. I mean, it's a great book. I've read part of it, and I can say
Thank you.
Anyone who's read the Why It's Okay to Love Bad Movies book will know that it's a good read and it's really fun. There's tons of interesting examples. Anyone I think who's listening to this could get something out of it. So check it out.
Thank you.
It is currently, when this is live, the book will be available to buy. So go buy it right now. Hard to watch.
It's called, the subtitle is How to Fall in Love with Difficult Movies.
Oh yeah.
I do need this as my self-help book.
Yeah.
Justin knows this. Justin watches difficult movies. I tend to choose sleep.
It's okay. Laura's tired. I mean, you can't at every point in your life have space for difficult movies.
It's okay.
But Matt, you continue to. I mean, I watched 3 twirlies this week because you were coming and my life is better for it. And I'm glad I did. And now maybe we should rewatch Night of Cops and see where I'm at with that.
Yeah.
But
I encourage it.
And when the first time you came on this podcast, I didn't think I liked Twilight. And Justin was like, guess what? We're watching 5 movies. And I was like, God damn it, Justin, I want to sleep. That's too many movies. And now my life is so much better for it.
Yeah, we got a Twilight poster on our wall. Thanks to you, Matt.
I'm really happy if my influence in your life is more Night of Cups and more Twilight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, truly.
It is.
Truly.
But it's just, it's
the ultra high, ultra low. That's what I'm about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do need an extrinsic motivation, and this podcast is it for putting me outside my comfort zone or having me watch things that I'll put on tarot before I put on something good.
Easy.
Maybe
it's easy to do. Well, thank you very much for being here, Matt.
Thank you too. I really had a great time.
In the field. You really helped us.
We had dinner together tonight. This is the level we're at. Here.
Yeah.
We went out to dinner.
We went out to dinner. We watched Megalopolis.
We played with Legos.
Played with Legos. We watched Song to Song. We went in the mine.
You did some mining.
We did some mining. But truly, Matt, the work that you put in to unpack the movie led me to better appreciate it. And I hope will lead others who are listening to this to better appreciate it and to find their own path through it and open up new avenues for them, because that's what this is all about. The whole point.
To me, that's what cinephile community is all about. Exactly. So that's my greatest hope. So that's awesome. That warms my heart.
Absolutely. For the rest of you, we are at CalsPod on Twitter. You can, by the way, you can follow Matt Strohl on Twitter at Strohltopia.
STROHL. Yep. Strohltopia.
Strohltopia. We are at CalsPod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at calspod.com. In 2 weeks, we will be talking to Roxana Haddadi about the film Drive, and we will see you then. Bye.